The Hunger Games, Part 1, Chapter 2. Somewhere far away, I can hear the crowd murmuring unhappily as they always do when a 12-year-old gets chosen because no one thinks this is fair. And then I see her, the blood drained from her face, hands clenched in fists at her sides, walking with stiff, small steps up toward the stage, passing me, and I see the back of her blouse has become untucked and hangs out over her skirt. It's this detail, the untucked blouse forming a ducktail, that brings me back to myself. Prim! The strangled cry comes out of my throat and my muscles begin to move again. Prim! I don't need to shove through the crowd. The other kids make way immediately, allowing me a straight path to the stage. I reach her just as she is about to mount the steps. With one sweep of my arm, I push her behind me. I volunteer! I gasp. I volunteer as tribute.
Hello, I'm Professor Ruth Cannell, and today I'm going to be reading from A Light in the Attic, which is on the American Library Association's list of frequently banned children's books. And this particular book was given to me by my grandparents, and it is much loved by my children now. And I'm going to be reading Something Missing. Something missing. I remember I put on my socks. I remember I put on my shoes. I remember I put on my tie that was painted in beautiful purples and blues. I remember I put on my coat to look perfectly grand at the dance. Yet I feel there is something I may have forgot. What is it? What is it? So this book has been banned because it promotes Satanism, it has suggestive images, and it teaches children to rebel against their parents. So, great book to read.
Hi, I'm Professor Rachel Miskevich. Happy Banned Books Week. I'll be reading an excerpt from The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. As we wait in our double line, the door opens and two more women come in, both in the red dresses and white wings of the handmaids. One of them is vastly pregnant. Her belly under her loose garment swells triumphantly. There's a shifting in the room, a murmur, an escape of breath. Despite ourselves, we turn our heads blatantly to see better. Our fingers itch to touch her. She's a magic presence to us. An object of envy and desire, we covet her. She's a flag on a hilltop, showing us what can still be done. We, too, can be saved. The women in the room are whispering, almost talking, so great is their excitement. Who is it? I hear behind me. Of Wayne. No, of Warren. Show off, a voice hisses, and this is true. A woman that pregnant doesn't have to go out, doesn't have to go shopping. The daily walk is no longer prescribed to keep her abdominal muscles in working order. She needs only the floor exercises, the breathing drill. She could stay at her house. And it's dangerous for her to be out. There must be a guardian standing outside the door waiting for her. Now that she's the carrier of life, she is closer to death and needs special security. Jealousy could get her. It's happened before. All children are wanted now, but not by everyone. But the walk may be a whim of hers, and they humor whims, when something has gone this far and there's been no miscarriage. Or perhaps she's one of those pile it on, I can take it, a martyr. I catch a glimpse of her face as she raises it to look around. The voice behind me was right. She's come here to display herself. She's glowing, rosy. She's enjoying every minute of this. Quiet, says one of the guardians behind the counter, and we hush like schoolgirls. Glenn and I have reached the counter. We hand over our tokens, and one guardian enters the numbers on them into the CompuBite, while the other gives us our purchases, the milk, the eggs. We put them into our baskets and go out again, past the pregnant woman and her partner, who beside her looks spindly, shrunken, as we all do. The pregnant woman's belly is like a huge fruit, humongous, word of my childhood. Her hands rest on it as if to defend it, or as if they're gathering something from it, warmth and strength. As I pass, she looks full at me, into my eyes, and I know who she is. She was at the Red Center with me, one of Aunt Lydia's pets. I never liked her. Her name, in the time before, was Janine. Janine looks at me then, and around the corners of her mouth there's a trace of a smirk. She glances down to where my own belly lies flat under my red robe, and the wings cover her face. I can see only a little of her forehead, and the pinkish tip of her nose.
Chapter 1, The Reader of Books. It's a funny thing about mothers and fathers. Even when their own child is the most disgusting little blister you could ever imagine, they still think that he or she is wonderful. Some parents go further. They become so blinded by adoration they manage to convince themselves their child has qualities of genius. Well, there is nothing very wrong with all this. It's the way of the world. It is only when the parents begin telling us about the brilliance of their own revolting offspring that we start shouting, "Bring us a basin, we're going to be sick."
Hey everyone, it's Professor Downey. Happy Banned Books Week. Today I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my favorite banned book, which is Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut. How does the universe end? Said Billy. We blow it up, experimenting with new fuels for our flying saucers. A Tralfamadorian test pilot presses a starter button and the whole universe disappears. So it goes. If you know this, said Billy, isn't there some way that you could prevent it? Can't you keep the pilot from pressing the button? He has always pressed it, and he always will. We always let him, and we always will let him. The moment is structured that way. So, said Billy gropingly, I suppose the idea of preventing a war on Earth is stupid too. Of course. But you do have a peaceful planet here. Today we do. On other days we have wars as horrible as any you've ever seen or read about. There isn't anything we can do about them, so we simply don't look at them. We ignore them. We spend the eternity looking at pleasant moments, like today at the zoo. Isn't this a nice moment? Yes. That's the one thing Earthlings might learn to do, if they tried hard enough. Ignore the awful times and concentrate on the good ones.
Hello, happy Banned Books Week, everyone. I'm Professor Bull, and I'm going to read a short selection from A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. This is a book that I discovered in high school and just frankly couldn't believe that something like this was in my library. It's profane, it's violent, and yet, maybe most importantly, it is very interesting how they talk about criminal reform, how they talk about government role in criminal reform, and what prison life might do to a person for good or for bad. So with that in mind, I'm going to be reading a short selection from the end of chapter 3 of part 3. Our narrator, Alex, is finding himself out of prison, fully reformed, or so he thinks, and he bumps into two of his former gang members who are now upstanding citizens and police officers, and they decide to take out some revenge on him. All right, so this is A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. This will do, said Billy Boy. We were now in the country, and it was all bare trees and a few odd distant twitters, and in the distance there was some like farm machine making a whirling schwoom. It was getting all dusk now, this being the height of winter, and there were no ludies about, nor no animals. There was just the four. Get out, Alex boy, said Dim. Just a malaky bit of summary. All through what they did, this driver Vec just sat at the wheel of the auto, smoking a cancer, reading a malaky bit of a book, and he had the light on in the auto to viddy by. He took no notice of what Billy Boy and Dim did to your humble narrator. I will not go into what they did, but it was all like panting and thudding against this like background of whirling farm machines and the twittering in the bare and nagoy branches. You could viddy a bit of smoky breath in the auto light, this driver turning the pages over quite calm. And they were on to me all the time, oh my brothers. Then Billy Boy or Dim, I couldn't say which, said, About enough, Droogie, I should think, shouldn't you? And then they gave me one final talchak on the lip-so each, and I fell over and just laid there on the grass. It was cold, and I was not feeling the cold, Then they dusted their rookers and put back on their schlems and tunics, which they had taken off, and then they got back into the auto. Be viddy you some more sometime, Alex, said Billy Boy, and Dim just gave one of his old clowny guffs. The driver finished the page he was reading and put his book away. Then he started the auto, and they were off townwards, my ex-droog and ex-enemy waving, but I just lay there, fagged and shagged. After a bit, I was hurting bad, and then the rain started, all icy. I could viddy no ludies in sight, nor no lights of houses. Where was I to go, who had no home and not much cutter in my garments. I cried myself, boo-hoo-hoo, and then I got up and began walking.